Hello.
Oh,
We are back to our series of chats with culture and creative industries experts, consultants, advisors, researchers across Europe in those times of crisis. Today, we are checking in with our friend Joost Heinsius from the Netherlands. Hello, Joost. How are you?
hello. I'm fine. You?
Oh, very well. How is the situation in the Netherlands with the crisis, and how are the Dutch creative industries coping with the current crisis?
Yeah. It's a big economic crisis anyway. I mean, it's a big health crisis and a big economic crisis. And many stores, many companies are going broke. There are a lot of help measures, luckily enough. So I think even the really big wave of bankruptcy will probably be coming later. Maybe probably in autumn, when like the demand for goods and for services is not back yet at the historical level. But it's obviously enormous crisis. And if we're talking about the culture and creative industries, um, I mean, in the Netherlands, about 60% of the people working in the culture and creative sector are independents, are freelancers. And most of them are just immediately stopped, no income, because I mean they live actually week by week, from performance to performance. So their income just stopped. And I heard already from many, yeah, if they have some reserves, okay, they can manage for a little while, but for how long, nobody knows. And for others, they had to file for public assistance, etc. And and then there was a lot of doing because some people were not allowed and others were allowed, and had to change the system. So it took a lot of time, a lot of hassle, but they're waiting to go for paid work, at least online. Because what you see is that a lot of art is going online now, and so there are all these online performances and talks, etc. And which I think is a good thing because artists always go on; they cannot stop. They cannot stop making art. It's just something that's impossible for them. So they go on and they make art and they show it, which I think is very good. But it also has a almost a negative side. Maybe it's also something that they don't want to be forgotten. They really have to show themselves. Like, I'm still here. I'm still here. It's almost like a psychological process of I have to be seen. Which probably, if you're an artist, you always want to be seen, and maybe they're afraid to not to be seen anymore.
Joost, to our viewers, Joost is a very experienced expert, advisor, strategy consultant, and researcher. Those that have been involved in the European Union projects know Joost very well. You've been part of many of them. And even recently, and even ongoing projects, including the FLIP program by the European Commission and many others. One of your trademarks, if I may call this, your blog as well, the Values of Culture and Creativity, you have focused on this very thing that you just mentioned, the social value, social impact of arts and culture to society at large. So who else to ask, if not you, at this times of crisis, what is the value? What's the true value of arts and culture?
What do you see? I mean, there are so many ways art and culture and creative industries contribute to society. So where to start? What you see now is that an old frame is coming back, especially with conservative political parties. Namely, that it's like the people in the sector are like kind of like hooked on subsidies, etc. Which is always also alive among the population quite often. And they ignore the economic contribution of the arts and culture and creative industries. They ignore the social value where people work, for example, in community arts with people with disadvantages or with handicaps or people who are not as well off as we are. Um, Innovation values, I mean, the people in the arts and the creative industry invent a lot of new stuff which is not there yet. They have the imagination to imagine new futures or new possibilities. And so they have an immense value, which is not so visible still. And I think it's very important to make that visible now, because in this crisis, I think culture and creative industries could be very valuable, but it's not so visible. So I would think there should be like a national task force in the Netherlands, for example, to find commissions from all other sectors for artists and for creatives to participate in, so they can put their value to work, which works in two ways. They have some income, and on the other side, they provide value, which becomes visible. And I think that's one of the ways out of this crisis also. But it's always this connection with society, I think, is very important. And it's not, because especially in the high arts, it's kind of looked down upon to have this kind of social value. You know, art for art's sake is still very often heard. And I think it's really time that it's becoming more and more visible and also more recognized as being very valuable.
But if you think back to the projects that you've been involved in recent years, where you have been really working with kind of creating such a kind of framework, development framework for culture creative industries, both on the national level in the Netherlands, but also on the EU level. Have you been surprised during this crisis in any ways? Has the crisis revealed something about the culture creative sectors that both either in positive or negative ways? Something about the sector that you didn't expect?
Well, I think there's not so much I did not expect, I'm afraid. I mean, you see the resilience. People just go on forever. But the other part of it, that's they're not connecting business model to it. I mean, all these online initiatives, which are very beautiful, but they give it all away for free. And I think one of the big challenges, and that's, I think, is one of the negative sides of this industry, they want to produce and they look afterwards maybe for the money. So I think one of the big challenges now is to connect new business models to all those digital initiatives. So I think that's one of the big things that should be happening now. And for the other hand, I'm still surprised that so many artists and creatives are not aware of how financing works. Recently, we did a small research with some groups of artists from all kinds of different disciplines, and most of them never even thought about taking out a loan because nobody else does. So there's a very kind of peer pressure on artists and creatives. They find it hard to do anything else than their peers do. And their lack of financial knowledge is now really a negative side for their future. Because we need a lot of, for example, bridging loans. People can start up making productions again. And because their reserves are now gone, usually they produce from what they made last year, but they have to use that money now to keep on living. So they don't have any money anymore to make the next production. So I think we need a lot of bridging loans, or very cheap ones, like for almost 0% interest, maybe 2%, to make them help to start again. And I think that's important, but it's almost heartbreaking to see how many people in the sector do not know enough about financing.
But very interesting point, especially because you have now worked with the financing of creative industries issue across Europe. You mentioned the loans. There has been many voices saying that loans are not the right answer at this very moment, because if you are even a private person going for a bank for a loan, you need to give you need to have some sort of stability and some sort of a forecast of how will you pay that loan.
Yeah.
Now, as we have absolutely no clue what the world will look like, what's going to happen, how long this crisis will last, what will be the short, medium, and long-term impacts of the crisis, then, I mean, isn't the loan a bit pushing the real decision-making time just forward?
Well, that's also why I'm saying that there should be really specific kind of loans made available, especially for this sector, because we know that especially in the Netherlands, banks will not give loans to the sector. They want securities, they want forecasts, they don't know how the sector works, etc. So that's not going to work. So we really need really specific funds, and they don't have to be really big money, because they can work with little money anyway. And I think if they are able to produce even online things and they connect a business model to it, then they will start making money again. And of course, there can be general measures just to supply income, but they will stop at some point. And they will stop probably, I think, here in the Netherlands, probably in the end of the summer. And then people have to make money somehow again. So we need to kind of develop this kind of funds where people can start making again. And yeah, I think you need loans is one of the means that you can start working again, make money.
We have worked, Joost, together with you and many other people for many years to raise awareness among the policymakers on all levels for the importance of culture creative industries. Do you think that this work for the past 10, 15, 20 years has paid off in a sense that do you see more understanding from the policymakers' point of view to support and to invest in culture creative industries and these difficult times, or rather you still see them sliding back to the simple measures of cutting down the unnecessary areas first, including culture and creativity?
You see both, actually. I mean, some parts are really, for example, the province of Brabant has just had a new government and they want to cut immediately on culture, like 60%. So, I mean, that's not immediately necessary. On the other hand, we see slowly, it's been very slow and tedious work, but I see a rising interest from policymakers that the culture creative sector is really of value and that they should be supported, and that they're looking for new ways of supporting them. Because we all know that the way the amount of grants and subsidies will not grow for a long time, probably, or maybe even go down. So we have to find other ways of supporting them. So one of them is like what I would call commissions for more in the social field or in the health field, etc. And the other one is financial measures. And I think a big part of that is also capacity building. I've become more and more convinced that capacity building is really the key on how to survive.
In terms of capacity building, what are these, in your view, the critical skills and competences that culture creative sectors need now more than ever, looking forward to the years to come?
I've seen so often that because people working in culture creative sector, they're very competent professionals, but they often do not realize how those competences can be of use somewhere else. And when they see that, they are very surprised. I mean, I know a theater director who's now working also for a big accounting firm to help them make stories, help them to connect with the clients, etc. Um, and they were really in the beginning very surprised that they were of value to such a big company. They would have never expected that. So that's one thing that is about capacity building, is that we really have to maybe almost drag them out of their bubble and bring them somewhere else, and see what their value is. And the other part is financial competence. Um, um, because I mean, most of them are very entrepreneurial in their attitudes. They see chances all over the place, but making the connection between those chances and how to make money out of it and how to use different financial systems to make a living out of it, and going from from project to project based life to a more like business life. Those transitions are so important, and they still, I mean, I cannot stress them enough to find those skills and teach them.
You live you live very close to Brussels. You worked a lot with Brussels. Uh, how what's your take on how has the European Union managed during this crisis, also in terms of its reaction and its contribution to culture creative industries?
Yeah, there have been a lot of words. I think the new commissioner is working quite hard, and she really wants to achieve a lot. But of course, I mean, they always work very slowly. Um, so it will take quite a lot of time before they really want to. I mean, this new platform, creativesunite.eu, where people can collect experiences and ideas and contribute ideas. They did that quite fast, actually, but almost without any budget. And I think that's still a big problem within the EU, that culture and creative industries are not so much prioritized that they have budgets enough to really grow. And of course, it's also divided, because I mean, culture is within DG EAC, design is a lot within DG Digital, and there's also part within DG Enterprise. And yeah, maybe that's also good to profit from the different perspectives, but it's also that it's hard to have a combined view and a combined perspective.
You mentioned the digital transformations. You were talking about how companies, how creatives around the world have started to put forward their creation with digital means, and how they have not yet managed to link the business model to it. My question, Joost, to you, in your opinion, is how what do you think? How profound will the changes be in long term for the culture creative sectors? Is what we are seeing now with this digital offer, both from the creatives and businesses, but also from institutions like museums and theaters and operas, etc. Are they kind of temporary measures to kind of survive, build trust, keep the audiences going, and counting days or minutes when this is all over, so we can go back to how it was? Or you think that some of this will be changing the way we understand and how we are engaging culture creative industries for a longer time?
I would love to have a digital crystal ball to tell you what's going on, what will be going on. No, I mean, part of the audience and part of culture institutions, and I'm afraid, especially the bigger ones and the older ones, will go back to normal. But and of course, life experiences are very important. But if you're looking at the younger people who are like digital natives, and you want to really involve those, then I think especially younger groups. I was at an advisory committee for the city of Rotterdam, for judging the plans for the next 4 years. And especially you see the younger groups who are applying, they're much more digital. They're combining digital with live. They're building digital communities and come together in a live place. Those combinations, I think they are the future. So it's not only being only digital, but those combinations and intelligent combinations, I think that's something that's going to last.
Yeah, it has been some sort of a wake-up call for many. They, especially, we see this in the field of museums, where probably the first 2 months of lockdowns have brought about digital transformation that we haven't seen in the last 5 to 10 years. So that's true. You also worked in your past with European creative hubs. Now, hubs in terms of in comparison with content creators like museums or theaters or opera or concert or audiovisual content providers is different. They are different because they rely on that physical clustering effect. How will European creative clusters survive this crisis?
Good question. I think that the physical combination of people is still important. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about digital offices, but a lot of people now realize that the small talk, the incidental meetings are really crucial for creativity and etc. and innovation. So that will return somehow. But those creative hubs will probably also develop more digital services, etc. for the future. But their core strength is still in bringing people together, also in a live way. And I think that will not disappear. And how they're going to design their workspaces with keeping social distance, etc., nobody knows yet. There's a lot of innovation going on in finding that out. So, but I think they will survive because, I mean, especially for a lot of independents, those places are really necessary to get together, to innovate, to make the position stronger also. So I think they will survive, but it could take maybe a year or two before they're really back in full swing.
Just maybe in the end, if you allow me to ask more a personal question, you as a creative consultant, a freelancer yourself, what kind of projects, what kind of questions arrive to you in these times? What kind of people with what kind of problems are turning to creative industries consultants like you?
Yeah, I work in different areas, so that's always, but that's also where I'm good in and what I like, because I like to combine those different areas. So both on social value and also on financing, but also work a lot on strategies for organizations. So what are we here for? And so I'm helping now in an organization which is like community building, where artists actually do social work in a very different way, and I help them formulate what they're doing, which is different than others, like social work does, but also like most artist work, for example. But also, what I see is that one of the questions that will come up a lot is financing still, even maybe more than ever. Digital, we talked about. Social value, we talked about. I think those questions are coming up all the time. How to survive this crisis and how to go forward, especially. Because otherwise, you see as also a lot of people in the culture sector want to go back. they want to go back to being supported by the state. It's kind of regression, and I think that's not the answer. And especially with the big cultural institutions and the old elites, the culture elites, who would like to go back to that stage, but that's not going to work. You have to go forward instead of going backwards.
We're almost in the middle of May. I'm looking out of my window, and it is snowing. Snowing at the moment.
Wow.
The last question that I've asked in this series, the people we talked to, has been that if we reconnect exactly in a year's time, May next year, what do you think the world would look like?
That's a quite challenging question, because I mean, there are a lot of people who think this crisis could be a tipping point for a lot of change, becoming more green, becoming more social, less neoliberal, etc. And of course, some of those changes I would like to have happened too, but I'm afraid that a lot of forces are there to go back to what it used to be. So I think how to find this balance, how to see if we're be able to be effective in some of those changes, making a few steps forward, and hoping to contribute to that. That's what I would like to see in a year from now. It's slow work, but you just have to keep on doing it and be resilient.
Be resilient. That's a good wish. Thank you, Joost. It was great to talk to you in those burning questions for the culture creative sectors across Europe and across the world. I wish you all the best and stay negative.
Okay, but let's stay connected, and wish you all the best too, Ragnar. Okay. Bye-bye.